Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Stonebridge Confab. Really great day today. Going to be a lot of fun to go through some really awesome content here. As you can see on stream, we have a special guest as well. Mr. Eric Newell decided to join us to kind of give more background, obviously, on some of these predictions that we're going to be talking about today. So, Eric, introduce yourself and welcome.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me on, Scott. I'm Eric Newell. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Stonebridge Software, and also one of the founders of Leverage, our ISV software, built on top of Dynamics as well, too. So glad to be here with you talking about technology trends for 2024 and where we're seeing a lot of clients' interest and sharing that, and excited to hear from people in the chat, too, with what questions they have.
Right. So it's going to be a fun day today to really, I always love Eric kind of doing these technology predictions because, I will say I think we're fairly educated in terms of where the technology is going. But I remember Eric one time receiving someone that was talking about how the mouse was going to go away. And I'm still using my mouse. So I guess I want people to be kind of subjective here when they go through these conversations, right? Because I think a lot of these make a lot of sense, but as we've seen with 2023, there are some disruptions that come out of nowhere that can potentially change some of these predictions, as you can imagine.
Yeah, and really, you and I talked about AI a couple of years ago and how we weren't really seeing it propel to the level that we thought it might get to, but then last year was very different in that space. So yeah, there's always big technology changes that sometimes come that we know are going to happen, but we just don't know the scale of how big they're going to get. And
right.
So it'll be interesting to see how the year plays out there.
Well, yeah, I agree as well. We will see kind of what happens here, but I think we've got some really good direction in chat here too, team. So as we go through this, feel free to add your comments, introduce yourself. Christian, appreciate you joining as well. Rob looks like is on, Matt as well. Go ahead and say hi. We'll have you on chat. I'll be moderating that and kind of interacting as we go through this. Really, today is technology predictions for 2024. And if you haven't been part of a Stonebridge Confab in the past, at a really high level, this is a really interactive session. It's not designed to be a webinar per se. It's more designed around the community and questions and opinions that we all have. And many of you have seen, for example, even demonstrations that we have done that aren't what we would call like a webinar type demonstration, right, as we go through this. So we're really excited to be able to have that conversation and just learn more about what your perspectives are as we go through this. And one final thing I want to note here is that we now are broadcasting on 3 different platforms, which is a lot of fun. So today, the marketing team, thanks to Leah and Carly, went ahead and set up the YouTube channel for us. So we are streaming right now to YouTube, to Twitch, and also to LinkedIn all at the same time. So it's a pretty exciting day. I'm going to be watching chat to see if we get any bots in here, but yeah, it should be fun, Eric, to see kind of how that all pans out.
Yeah, the questions from bots should be interesting.
Right. All right. Well, let's go ahead. I'm going to do this, Eric, real quick. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to flip over to our presentation mode. And like I said, as comments come in here, please let us know. It looks like I've got a setup thing that did not work. So one sec, Eric, because we do want to see you on stream here. And there we go. There you are. All right, let's jump in. So we've got a PowerPoint here at a high level to kind of guide us through some of these predictions that we're going to be going through. And like I said, some of these, there's a lot of different technologies, right, Eric, that we could have talked to. And what we're really kind of focusing more on here are the really business system centric type technology predictions that we know we're more of experts around, obviously, and that's where we want to provide some guidance, obviously, to many of you that are out there in terms of what you should be looking for in 2024 as you go through maybe a system implementation or as you're examining, for example, some new capability that you want to add into your environment. And really that's where we focus, right, Eric, is really around that business system space.
Yeah, I mean, our expertise is digital transformation for business. So that's what we're talking about. There's lots of interesting stuff going on and personal devices and things like that, but that won't be the scope for today.
Right. So, Eric, why don't you give a little bit more background on yourself here? I know at the beginning of the stream you kind of mentioned it, but at a high level, you're our fearless leader, right, at Stone Ridge. You've got Leverage, which is our ag-specific solution. You came from Microsoft. Maybe you can give us a little bit more background on your expertise here.
Sure, yeah. I started back at Microsoft actually with Great Plains Software back on GPE Enterprise version 5.5 back in 1999. So I've been in the dynamic space for many years. I spent 13 years at Microsoft, kind of moving from a support engineer role to more of a support systems management, so running essentially IT for support, and then back into a premier account manager role and leading the premier field engineering team. So tons of great experience, learned so much in my 13 years there, and then decided to go out on our own here in 2012. So now we've been 11 years at Stone Ridge Software. Scott, your 10-year anniversary is in 2 weeks,
I
so
know it's
that's
coming
pretty
up,
fun.
right?
Yeah, so we've been doing that for many years. I've worn just about every hat within the organization. I spent probably more of my time doing project management and engagement management than any other kind of client-facing function. But one of the things I'm getting to do now is some strategic planning conversations with clients, talking about where technology is going and how we can advise them on their staffing or their plans or where they should make investments, how they should think about how much they're investing in various different areas. So those are all places that I'm very passionate about talking about. And then I wrote a book about how to implement Microsoft Dynamics a couple of years ago. So that's out on the market if anyone's interested in looking at more of a customer facing approach to like what are the steps to have a successful implementation. There was really nothing out there, and so that's what really drove me to write that.
Yeah, and that was awesome, Eric. I remember when you were going through that, I'm like, you don't have enough to do the way it is, and you just added that onto it. So it's a fantastic book. I would recommend anyone take a look at it to understand really the perspective of how you go through an implementation process and some of the tidbits with it. Obviously, there's different ways of implementing software, but at Stone Ridge, we really, run with that and harness a lot of those capabilities, right, Eric, that are part of that. So it's a really good read, and I'd recommend it to anyone. And I'll just do a high level. Scott Frappier, as Eric had mentioned, I've been with Stone Ridge for 10 years, been in the channel for 20 plus years. I think I'm at 25 years at this point. I really love technology. I really love to focus on how we can use technology to enable businesses, right, as we go through that. So, yeah, right. Rob is like, is this an ad? Rob, thank you for posting the link. So anyone that wants the book, we've done our ad now, right? So you've got the ability to go ahead and access it right there. And then Rob had another one too, did the predictions, and there Eric has got the book right there, and did the predictions from last year fare well. I'd have to take a look at that, Rob. I don't know if we did a formal tech predictions. I think we did a year of, and I think our year of last year was automation, and it did really align with things that were being introduced, even with the AI push with it. So, like I said, we will take this one for sure and take a look at it to see like what changed in the market, obviously, to see how accurately we are doing these predictions. So I think that's a really good way to get some feedback right with it as well. So I guess with that, Eric, let's go ahead and jump in here because I know we've got a limited amount of time here. So I guess at a high level, what we want to do is we want to count down really on 4 separate technologies that we see maybe at different levels as well, right? We had that discussion, but at a high level, we want to kind of highlight technologies and trends that we're expecting people probably to invest more into, as they're not like bleeding edge type technologies. They're more of technologies now that businesses can actually have some tangibility around or some usage around. Would you agree with that, Eric, at a high level?
Yeah, our goal here isn't to tell you the thing that you're going to be doing 10 years from now. It's like, here's where we're seeing our clients and invest this year and where we're seeing the most interest and investment in these technologies this year. So that's how we went through and came up with our top 4 for this year.
Awesome. So I guess with that, let's start with number 4 here, because I think this is one that has been in varying levels inside of other people's presentations as well, right? And that really is the IoT, or Internet of Things. I know there's so many different levels to the Internet of Things, I guess, is what it really boils down to. And I want to be really kind of targeted here on where we see a lot more traction around IoT, because I think, Eric, you even were like, well, what do we see inside of IoT that's a major driver, right, as part of these conversations? So I guess at a high level, just to kind of frame this, really what we're looking at from an IoT perspective is identifying like what really is IoT. IoT is a concept, obviously, that allows for devices to basically send information to a machine so that we can record it and take some type of action with it. It could be an automated system action related to it. It could be information that's given to an end user. It could be even going back to the consumer, as we've seen like with consumer devices, like with fridges, like Samsung has it where it can look into your refrigerator, and if it doesn't see milk, it'll tell you to order milk. That's an extreme of IoT, in my opinion, when it comes to the consumer side of it. But more on the business side, what we see more commonly with IoT really revolves around things like enterprise asset management, or CMMS systems, where you're basically taking assets and you want to record, for example, the flow rate that goes through a filter, or you want to be able to understand the mileage that a car gives so that you can schedule service for it and become more proactive as you go through that, instead of having to train an employee, for example, to basically record all of that meter data, right? And it's been something in the pre-sale side we've started to see much more, because obviously there's a lot of companies that are looking at trying to figure out how to get data into our systems so that they can then report and use some of those metrics with it. I think, Eric, like for you, even with IoT at a high level, I think we were talking about like your vehicle, like they are more integrated now, right? And there's some other tech that, is sending more data. And I think I'm just going to see more and more of that this year is what it really boils down to.
Yeah, I use IoT quite a bit personally, just keeping track of, and I own a couple restaurants, so I've got cameras at various different restaurants to see how many people are here, whether a cook showed up, stuff like that. And that's been a really valuable thing. I also, as a Tesla owner, too, had being able to see information from your car, no matter where you are, start your car in the winter, all those kind of cool things that you can do now using the internet has been great. So I'm a big believer in IoT, but I didn't put my voting chips as high on this one because I haven't heard as much about it from clients. So
Yep.
Scott, what are some of the things that you're hearing from clients on this?
Yeah, that's a great question, because IoT can mean so many things. But when we look at this, why do we feel that 2024 is going to have more traction around this? And I think it really comes down to a couple of things. I think the device costs to actually enable then some of these additional machines, for example, is becoming dirt cheap. Like you can buy these ESP32 devices now for less than $1, to be able to add that type of capability then to an existing product that you already have. Because consumers typically, even on the business side, want more information out of their equipment. In the manufacturing space, for example, when you have a press, you want to know how many times that press is operated to be able to replace the hydraulic fluid in it. In a time period with it, hydraulic fluid is expensive. If you think about it, you don't want to replace it unless it needs replacing. The same goes for filters. The same goes for different devices that you may be installing, for example, in your new business models of, for example, maybe you're not selling product anymore, maybe you're leasing product, right? So there's just a lot of different ways that data can be used and harnessed. And even Rob, you had mentioned inside of here, like with NFC or near field communications, like that helps with the service alignment too, where you could, for example, have a machine that may not be connected to the internet that you can scan maybe with a technician, and then it downloads all that information, feeds your business system, and then helps, for example, maybe with your engineering change order requirements that you have, because now you have telemetry data attached to a change order because there was a defect in a product. So the other thing here that the reason why I feel that IoT has the ability to really get some more traction in 2024 is also around obviously this AI initiative, because a lot of AI requirements, whether you're training a model to create an inference or whether or not you're trying to put some intelligence then behind how a system reacts, what they call ambient intelligence is what I'm learning about this. But what they're doing basically is you need that data in order to have some type of an action that needs to occur with it. So that's another big thing here, is that if you want to, for example, use EAM and you want to go from basically a predictive maintenance to a proactive maintenance approach, well, you're going to need that data so that the models know what to look for to figure out then what reaction needs to occur with it. So like I said, I think those are bigger things for 2024. All the new machines that are coming out that are in the manufacturing and distribution spaces typically have some type of integration from a data perspective that they can send information with. And like I said, I just think it's going to be something bigger here that's going to get some more traction. Carl had a really good point too here as well. A device is not just a device, it's a device with a low-end computer embedded or associated that actually communicates. So IoT is really just a computer-to-computer integration as opposed to a computer-to-human integration. And Carl, 100%, like that's a really good way to look at it. And I think that we're going to need more of those to make automation better here longer term.
Yeah, I'm very bullish on IoT and what that means in the future for sure. I think too, with robotics becoming more and more mainstream in the next few years, you're going to see a lot of devices that are being controlled from afar. And so anything, and like you said, and we'll talk about here shortly, there's an explosion of data, and everyone who wants to get data across everything that there is in their environment so they can make better informed decisions. And that's really, I think, what's driving a lot of the IoT desire as well.
I agree. And like I said, it might start more incrementally, and maybe it's on the EAM side of this that we see more, or maybe in manufacturers, because I know like with ProBatch and some of the other solutions that we sell on BC and on the FinOps side, there has been conversations more around that. So it's really, really cool to see here moving forward. One thing I forgot to mention, Eric, I'll say it in chat too. In chat, if you like number one, I want to see what people think is the number one prediction here as we get to it, as we do the countdown. So we're at number 3, so you've got a little bit of time.
There's no way they're going to be able to guess it.
Yeah, I don't think so. It's not obvious at all what's happening here, right? Right. All right. So number 3, that kind of leads into a really good point, right, Eric, around data, right? So BI and storage. And we kind of look at this all together in a lot of ways, but I know that they can be used as 3 independent initiatives, but coupled together, I don't know, it just feels like that's kind of where the industry needs to get to now, from our on-premise type data solutions that we used to have, where we had this brilliant architecture that we used, to now a lot of customers that are moving into the cloud, for example, or have moved into the cloud. That data architecture is a little bit different in terms of how they then access the data, how they consume it, how they interact with it. Chris in the background here, probably not AI, probably not at all, Chris, right? So, but this is a fun. Go ahead. Sorry, Eric. Yep.
And when we talk about data, I sometimes get frustrated because people will say, "Oh, we need to work on our data strategy." I mean, data is a big word, right? There's a lot going on in there. So when we talked about this too, I think there's a stat that I heard, which is really, if you step back and think about it, really pretty crazy, that data storage has been increasing 66% a year. 66%. That's a big number. When you think about all the zettabytes of data that are being tracked today, and it's still going up 66% per year. That's why the storage part is a big deal, is you got to have a storage plan to be able to keep track of all of that. And then you've got to be able to figure out a way to actually get business intelligence out of it. So when people think about data, there's so many different elements that go into it. And, what's our data strategy? I mean, that's not a 10-second answer. There's so many components to it. And I think as you dig into it a little bit more, you realize how complex it can be. But we can guide you on some of the key things that you need to be able to do to get there more quickly. But ultimately, what they're usually trying to get to is intelligence or wisdom. But that journey takes a few steps to get there.
Yeah, and at a high level, I think we definitely want to talk about that, because what I'm starting to see here is that we're getting the introduction of, for example, like BI assisted or AI assisted tools that allow you, like I've been using ChatGPT to do data analysis with some sample data sets. And it's pretty amazing what it can do in terms of, I told it to make charts and graphs. I told it to make a map. I told it to make a heat map then based off of data that I provided, for example, revenue by region. And it was able to do all that, Eric, with me just interacting with it from a typing perspective. But what's really important here is that a lot of businesses want this as well. And there was a demo that Microsoft did. I don't think it was for Project Sephora. I think it was for when they
Sophia?
were. Yeah, it was. Yeah, thank you, Sophia. I think it was for the new financial analysis tool that's looking at being
Oh
introduced,
yeah.
where they had it where a CFO could say, "Hey, watch this product category," and then based upon the permissions of the user, when the product category wasn't hitting budget, it would explode it down further at a lower level from a consolidated level or approach. And then they were able to put markers on it to then say, share this report then with the product owner. And the product owner was able to take that data and slice it to individual products and then look at BOMs and costs that are related to it and identified cost impacts with it. But what was amazing about it was that it was just typing in a conversation to say, show me this, show me this, show me this. And it was very easy for the AI based system, the co-pilot in that situation, to really go through and get to that data and interact with it. But if you don't have it, well, you're not going to be able to get to that level of details, what it boils down to.
Well, and I see that your data strategy is very fundamental in order to be able to have an effective AI strategy, right? Because you need to be able to have access to that data for your generative AI to work its magic. And so if you don't have this figured out, you're not going to be able to take advantage of AI as much as you otherwise would.
Yeah, agreed. The other things that come into this then are the storage, right? So now everyone's hearing we got to collect more data. So they're going to do more IoT. They're going to do more, co-pilot, more embedding with it. Well, storage costs are going to be another problem, right? Then because with some of these systems, for example, you don't want to store some of that type of data inside of Dynamics, for example. You may want to do it in a data lake as a repository for that. So this whole expansion that we're going to see, I think, is going to be a really big impact in terms of how we interact with data, how we store data, how we deal with data that is now also not just text. Because one of the things that we're going to start probably seeing in 2024 here is the introduction of these large multimodal models, which are LLMs that accept video, images, things of that nature, to be able to correlate. For example, like you have to train a model on crop nitrogen balance or chemical balance. I know that's an ag, right, Eric?
Oh
For
yeah,
some of the precision ag
your
capabilities.
MK, S&P.
Right, right. And what they have now, though, is that you can take that same picture without then training a high intensive specific model, and an AI system can kind of get fairly close based off of some of those values. So like I said, it's bringing that level up even further in terms of, if you don't have the data, well, then you've got some problems potentially with it. And maybe, Eric, it makes sense to kind of talk about that statement that you made, which is really wisdom as being the key output, obviously, from the data that you're collecting. How does that work in your mind?
Yeah, I really like this chart. So this is a chart that actually was talked about in the 80s. So it's been around for a while, but I just think it shows so well like the kind of hierarchy of how data gets to be evaluated. So if you think about data, it's really the lowest layer of the pyramid, right? It's the record that you save in the database. Like we have, we had a hit from a gentleman in Utah on our website yesterday. Well, that's just a piece of data, right? That doesn't necessarily tell us much. But it's important to be able to have that to be able to build on top of it. So if you have the data, then you can start to compile information. And information is more the collection of something informative, like your daily sales or how much you sold yesterday or how many people hit our website yesterday. So it's important to have that information, but it doesn't necessarily tell you what to do next or what is trending or things like that. And then if I think about knowledge is more like what are the trends that you're seeing? Okay, our daily sales have increased over the past 10 days. That's good to know. Or we're getting more hits from Canada than we were in the past few weeks on our website. So that's starting to give us knowledge and starting to see trends. But then when you get above the line, you really get to the wisdom piece of it, which is more forward looking. That's like taking knowledge and being able to use your experience in order to forecast the future. So to really have access to be able to do intelligent things with your data, you really need to be able to have that data become knowledge, categorized as information and further categorized into trends that becomes knowledge, and then be able to start thinking forward about where your business is going and what's going to happen in the future. So the blue and lines there are really indicating like what's a lagging indicator versus what's a leading indicator. And as a business owner, you really want to know what your leading indicators are, because that's what's going to be happening in the future. But all of this comes down to having the right data. If you don't have the right data in your system to begin with, your information and knowledge isn't going to be accurate. So I think if you kind of think about your data strategy in this format, is like, what is the data I need? What kind of information, what reports am I looking at? Okay, what is that actually telling me from a trend line? And then what are those trends telling me to do in the future?
Right.
And so I really love this model as a way to think about how you build your data strategy.
It makes a lot of sense, Eric. I mean, the thing I would just kind of implore people to kind of consider as well, the quality of the data, you could subjectively say that you want the best quality data, right? I would almost argue sometimes, and this is contrary to what some people will say, because they will say the quality of the data is what matters most. But sometimes the amount of data that you have, you can draw basically inferences from that data to get to a qualitative perspective with it. So collecting more, to me, feels like a more robust strategy for a business. What's the worst that can happen? You can have too much data and you have to delete it, right? Like, if you think about it. But
Right.
if you've never collected it, you can never get that perspective. And the other thing I'd say as well is that for business owners and leaders that are looking at really where they need to go from a data perspective, it can't just be business system data. It has to be data that's across your entire platform potentially. It may be customer service data. It may be call time data. It may be beyond that, then field service data that you're incorporating into it. It might be how people are doing a process internally from a change management perspective of data that you want to be collecting as well. So I guess at a high level, you want to try to get as much digitization of your processes and metrics that may be over the top to start, but then as part of your data strategy, I would expect, Eric, you'd be looking at some type of archiving, like how do we identify what's relevant data versus what is not relevant data as you're going through this pyramid. I would think it would help refine that, wouldn't it?
Yeah, for sure. I'm totally with you in that. And one of the things that I see that Tesla does really well is they instrument everything.
Right?
And so they put instrumentation on every little thing that happens. And some of that data they might not do anything with, but a lot of that data then feeds into some insights that they have that help them be able to run their business. So, like you suggested, I think you should try to instrument everything you can within your business. And
Right.
that leads back to the IoT and being able to track information from there. It's always better to have the information and disregard it than it is not to have the information. So,
Yep.
over time, as you start building your reports and your forecasts and your leading indicators, you might go, well, you know what, I don't really need this data. And there's definitely data that you're going to look at and be a lot more informative than other data.
Yep.
But if you don't have it, then you're just guessing.
Right?
And as a business owner, you don't want to make $1 million bets on a guess.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. Yeah, and in chat here we've got some good statements around it, right? So I know Robbie had mentioned there's often too many versions of the truth as well. So I mean, part
Yeah.
of this output that you're going to go through from data, information, knowledge, and wisdom is identifying then that one version of truth as well, so that everyone in the business is speaking the same language. I can't tell you how many times, Eric, I've gone into a prospect or an implementation and found out that two sales reports are just entirely different for the same question that we're asking, and that's really painful from a data trust perspective. So there's a lot to kind of get into this, and this is why we have a data and BI practice, right, that really focuses on not just dynamics but all these other systems as well.
Well, and a lot of times as you try to build this pyramid and you get to those reports and those forecasts, you start to see things like, oh, I'm not getting data here. I have a gap here. Or I've got two people they think it's the same report, but they're getting different results. So a lot of times you end up having to go fix problems on the data side as you go up that pyramid.
Yep.
And getting the right data is not a trivial thing, right? That's why we have architects on our team who can kind of think through the trade-offs of what is the right way to store this information, and how is it going to get entered? What's the consistency by which it gets entered? Those are all challenging problems, but as you start to build those insights, you can start to see, where is my data not giving me the information I need, or conflicting, or where is it missing?
Yep. Yep. Yeah. So, like I said, I think data this year, and I also think, obviously, Eric, with the explosion of some of the AI generated content, like it's good and bad, right? Like I think that's something that I'm really for, because it does make people's jobs easier. But just cutting and pasting AI based content into your website, for example, you know, what are you missing potentially in that discussion, right? And if you're going to have that all the time, are you over generating data, right? So I do think that maybe there is going to be conversations in the future here of, well, what data do you really need to capture, right? But at the beginning here, obviously, the more data the better, to be able to make kind of those decisions, I guess, at a high level. And I guess maybe, Eric, this kind of ties into number two here then as well, right? Like when we start thinking about IoT, we start thinking about data and storage and BI and analytics. One of the other areas that we feel is just going to be paramount, really in 2024 here, is going to be cybersecurity concepts, right? And there's a couple reasons, maybe, Eric, that I'll lead off with this on, and then I'd appreciate kind of your perspective with it. The first is, like, if you think about cybersecurity, the intent around cybersecurity is very much like a building in a lot of concepts, right? That you're applying basically security to data, to the access and infrastructure capabilities that you provide basically a reduction of risk that could expose the organization to losing trade secrets or customer specific data, for example, that shouldn't be shared, because you've got a non disclosure agreement between you and that customer, and there could be competitive insights inside of here, right? And with this explosion, and this is a comment I get almost every single time on the AI side of it, people are worried about, where is their data going? Is it going to another server and then training another model, so that way when somebody uses that model, they all of a sudden have your company specific proprietary information inside of there as well? So this cybersecurity is expanding in scope, as you can imagine, as we go through that. And I guess that's kind of where I'm at with it, is that at the cybersecurity perspective with it, you can't have really an introduction of AI without a focus around cybersecurity, I guess, in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I think this is such a big deal, and why I would like it as the number two trend this year. It's not like it hasn't been a trend for the past few years, but with the introduction of AI, like, you need to get this right. Like, you need to spend time and energy getting your cybersecurity strategy right, or you might miss out on the opportunity to take better advantage of AI, or even worse, you might leak a bunch of your internal data out unintentionally into large language models that do who knows what with that information. So the threats are been there over the past few years. They're going to continue to be there. They're going to continue to get more complex. So there's a constant battle here in order to try to stay ahead of that. But the onset of AI just makes this more and more important as well too, to really get it right.
Oh yeah, I can't tell you, Eric, how many stories I've read now and even interactions where I can now take a voice. I could take your voice and take 10 sentences and then replicate your voice on some of these paid services that are out there. I can they basically take a video camera and do a deep fake in real time now. It used to be that you could take those videos and you could have that voice and it could be like you could be talking to me, Eric, right now, and I wouldn't know unless I'm really looking deep into your image as to whether or not that was fake or not. And like I said, I just think it's such a big thing. And I guess the question is like, what do we do from a prevention and remediation, right? Because you've got some steps in here that you kind of go through to be able to kind of help identify and prevent really a lot of these types of scenarios. So how does that work?
Yeah, I've done a couple webinars over the past year, and so certainly for those folks that are interested in it, please check those out on our stoneridgesoftware.com site. But there's 7 things that I and the security team that we've got here, or our cloud services team, feel like is the most important thing to do. One is just investing in cybersecurity insurance, and we're not insurance salesmen, so they'll help you come up with a better strategy for that. But it is a fundamental thing that I recommend to protect you or protect the downside of what could happen if you lose your data. But having a backup strategy is so key. I mean, multi-factor authentication, you're seeing that more and more across just about every app that you're in. I see Facebook's doing it now too. It's so much more effective security measure than just having a password alone. So multi-factor authentication on all your key apps, just do it now. Like, don't, oh, well, I don't know if this is going to be a thing. It's a thing, do it. Phishing prevention. I mean, we get so many phishing emails on a daily basis. I just posted something today on LinkedIn about my new system that I built for tracking or managing my inbox. And a lot of the stuff that I have to get rid of is very clearly phishing emails.
Yep.
So those are still there all the time. Getting a firewall to protect your perimeter or virtual private networks or whatever it might be. But number 6 is maybe an overlooked piece of it, but it's a really important piece to AI. And that's just doing what we call identity and access management. We're just giving people the appropriate rights to their data within your system and doing things like turning off an account when someone leaves the company. It's amazing how many companies don't have a good process for offboarding somebody, or when someone changes roles. You might have somebody on the IT team who had access to everything, and now they move over to another role, and you forget to turn off the fact that they have access to everything. So just being able to better manage your internal access is a huge thing. And then the training piece of it is something that you need to regularly do. Like, these phishing emails get more and more hard to discern, and if you let some of that through, it can really have a huge impact on your business. So these are the key 7 things that I think every organization should do. But this is all, again, a bigger and bigger deal now that you've got more data to protect, and you've got the AI capability out there as well.
Yeah, and this kind of goes into why, right? We've kind of identified them as we've had this conversation, but AI LLMs like Copilot, for example, Phil on our cloud services, the leader of our cloud services team, he's made a really good statement around it, and that goes to Eric, kind of your statement as well regarding people and access that they have internally in your organization. When you have a large language model, it doesn't know, like, it's basically representing what that user has access to try to answer that question. So if you have access to everything inside of your organization for a lot of these Copilot based products, it's going to have access. It actually already has access to a lot of that typically. And then the end user, it'll screen that, right, as part of that to make sure that data can or cannot be included in its response generation, for example. Like it's one of those
I
things
mean, if
where
you don't
it's
have
open, right?
payroll
Right?
data protected in your system, and I type, "What did Scott Frappier make last year?" I mean, you don't want that
Can't you
out
see my
there.
wonderful background here? Right? You pay me really well, Eric, so we're good.
Yeah,
So,
he
right?
lives on the beach.
Right. So yeah, you nailed it though. So and that's a big thing. And I think the other thing too though, Eric, is that the conversation around AI has really made more of a focus around as well. Like what are the data laws here? Because like on the art side, we had talked about a little bit earlier. There's a lot of people that are really not on board with AI because of what it has the ability to do for displacement for jobs and roles, right? But at the same point, some of this content is copyrighted. Some of this stuff has patents that are related to it that are publicly accessible, but if I were a human being then copying and pasting that into a paper, that would be plagiarism, right? As I made that paper from a professional perspective with it. So what's going to happen here from a cybersecurity perspective when we have to introduce laws like GDPR that exist in EU in the US, how are you going to regulate that? And what I would say is that if you follow things like GDPR, you'll find that there's a lot of software-based capabilities that are introduced into the Microsoft products in order to be compliant then with GDPR regulations. And I remember, Eric, like for example, on Business Central, even on F&O, a field you can define whether or not it's customer content or account data. So that way it's held differently inside of a repository and doesn't allow it to go to certain regions, for example, depending upon what that data context is. So I just think there's going to be more of that really as time goes on here as well as you can imagine. Let's roll here,
All
right?
right, are we ready to unveil number one? No
Number
one
one,
is gonna
I
guess it. I
yeah,
can't.
I know this is a tough one, right? Right? AI and Copilot, right? We debated on this because it's like, well, I don't know. Like, I get it. Like everyone, it's the marketing as well. I think we can give some really good points here, Eric. How we can kind of demystify this, right? And maybe what I'll do here is I'll just kick this off. Like, why do we think that 2024, from a tech perspective, really is the year of AI, right? And really, if you think about it, 2023, when this happened in February of last year, it was all about the platform shift that needed to occur from a technology perspective. Back in the day, we had good old Clippy, and before that, we had Microsoft Bob, if you remember as well. I'm kind of aging myself now, but if you think about it, none of the applications or the platform really had some global capability that would allow for you to snap in large language model chat-based conversations within an application. So 2023 to me was really, Eric, all about that, where they wanted to add the ability, for example, to be able to send data to a large language model. They wanted to expose the chat panes with Copilot and all the applications. They wanted to start introducing then features with that so that we could then take, for example, the APIs that were already there, but automate those then from an AI generation perspective. And then they wanted to also look at what we call, for example, these multimodal capabilities that are becoming even more accurate, where it can take video content, for example, and then generate then additional content or embed that potentially in PowerPoint or in some other application for that matter. So it's a really big thing to get that platform done. And I don't know, Eric, I feel Microsoft in 2023 really focused on that. And this is the year of really tangibility of that we're going to start seeing. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, there's just been such an explosion of tools and capability. I mean, generative AI is really a revolutionary step that has been taken over the past year. And, for those of you who don't know as much about it, certainly we've got some webinars about that as well, too. So I won't recap all of that, but, it's dramatically impacting the amount of data generation that we have. About 1% was generated via AI in 2021, and next year it'll be 10% of all data is going to be generated by AI. So I think of 2023, if you want to scroll to the next one, is really the year that all these tools came out, right? So now you've got all these tools. OpenAI was a big, GPT-3 and GPT-4 was really the start of the wave there. But lots of different companies have come out with their tool, and Microsoft's really taken the GPT model from OpenAI and then built that, infused that into all their products because they've got that deep relationship with OpenAI. So to me, 2023 was the year of an introduction of tools. It was the year of curiosity about AI. I mean, just about everybody was really interested in it. And 2024 is going to be the year that AI turns into ROI.
Right.
So this is the year where we start using these tools to actually gain efficiency and make change the way that we work. So 23 was really about, here's a bunch of stuff, which is great. And for tech nerds like us, that's a lot of fun. But as a business owner, you like, well, that's really cool that it's fancy, but like, how does this actually save me money or make me money or whatever you want to do?
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's so important, or that's why I think it's the number one change that's going to happen this year isn't necessarily about introducing more AI tools. It's having those AI tools actually generate some ROI for your business.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, so one thing just to give an example with it that's really pointed on Dynamics 365 sales, just as a technology example of this. There's this concept called opportunity summaries that are generated now inside of sales, and the very first version that they introduced with it, Eric, it was less than impressive, to be honest, to be really candid. But what they did is they figured out, okay, let's do a setup screen here where to generate the opportunity summary, you can include specific fields that have a higher weight to them so that when it's sent to the large language model to generate a summary of that opportunity, it's including those key data points that you typically want to be reflected then inside of that opportunity summary. So go now 4 months after they introduced it at a preview level, and now it's actually pretty amazing. Like, you can have it where I could, as a salesperson, look at an opportunity and click on 5 different things to get all the information that I need. But now what it does is that it looks through the timeline. It goes and it looks into emails and gets content around it to get more context around it. It then brings that information back and then provides a summary. And I'll tell you, Eric, every single time I look at those summaries, they seem to get better and more accurate because it's looking at that data set and they're doing those improvements, and it's just really making it easier then where now I don't have to click on 10 different things to get a summary of where that opportunity is. I can expand the opportunity summary and see really the most important information that I need to know about and then execute off of it. Still not perfect, but I'll tell you what, it's better than sometime even the human-to-human conversation I have about opportunities. It's bringing more details to light that typically even human-to-human interactions aren't highlighting. So it's a pretty cool capability, in my opinion.
It can just search. It can search through so much more data now than it could in the past.
Yep.
Like, it feels like in the past you could search through this much data, and now you're searching through this much data to get the answers that you need. And I'll share a few examples here on the future slide about some ways that you can get some ROI out of it.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
it's amazing the capability that it can do. And the more data you throw at it, the better, right? The better results you're going to get. And yes, the results are not perfect, but if you can get 80% of the way done with something in a minute, as opposed to, and you have a little cleanup to work to do, just think how much time that saves you versus having to start from scratch. And
100% agree.
that's the huge efficiency gain that AI can provide.
Yeah, and I think it gets a bad rap, like in the Copilot products right here, Eric. We've got a lot that are introduced right for it. But like as an example, like so Azure AI Copilot or Copilot Studio, right? When we think about the development tools, a lot of people are like, well, we'll just generate code off of these to address an issue. And it can kind of do that. It's never perfect, and developers will look at it and kind of laugh at it sometimes too, especially when there's somebody that tries to use the tool that's not educated in the language and then says,
Right.
hey, just do this. You can typically see right through it pretty quickly. But
Like,
think about it,
I'm not a developer,
right?
and if I try to go say I'm going to develop something in BC, it's
Yeah.
probably not very good.
Yeah. It might
But
get you really close though, right?
yeah, but our actual BC developers, they can get a ton out
Right.
of it.
Well, also they can use it for other tasks. So don't look at it as just code generation. What about overflows in code? What about structure of code and recommendations that it can make that are more intelligent compared to the IntelliSense-based capabilities? Like you don't have to use it to just generate code. You can have it so that when you're doing a check-in, for example, that the core things that you need to be validated are validated, and it has such a better ability than maybe to find some of those things that a human would typically do as part of your audit process, for example. So, like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be content creation, it can be content support as well that you should be thinking through with Copilot if you think about the longer term goals of it.
Yeah, there's so much out here. And just to kind of do a quick run through of what's out there now. So Copilot search capability is in Bing.com, but you can also do an enterprise version internally where it doesn't share the prompts externally as well. So I highly recommend that. But I honestly feel like I've gotten so much better search results using the Copilot than I have using Google or Bing in the past. That's free and available. But I just got my hands on my Copilot for Microsoft 365 a couple days ago, and so I've started using that. And now there was an announcement last week that that's now going to be available through partners like us on February 1st. So I'm really excited. I'll share a couple things that I've done with it thus far. But Copilot for Sales is out there too. Scott talked a little bit about that, being able to look at opportunities, look at emails, pull that data in, and make much more intelligent decisions, get things moving faster. Copilot for Service is taking that same capability and applying it to your support cases and your knowledge base articles and creating bots that can interact with your clients and answer questions so you don't have to figure all that out.
Yep.
There's the security Copilot, and as you talked about the development tools, Copilot Studio being more of a non-developer or a creator kind of tool for non-programmers like me. But then you've got the capability added to GitHub, and then Azure AI. You can kind of do whatever you want with that if you've got the development skills to do that. So
Yep.
it's exciting to see all the products that are out there.
And so, what are those ROI opportunities that you were kind of talking about, Eric? You got me at the edge of the seat here.
Well, note taking is probably the biggest one. There's so much capability now. Like what we're doing is we're recording a lot of our Teams meetings that we have internally. And rather than having someone sit in the meeting and take notes, we're actually using the Teams Premium or the Teams capability there to actually take those notes. And it does an amazing job. So it'll record the video and it'll actually talk about who talked. It'll break the video into chapters. It'll come up with summaries. It'll come up with action items. So if you say, hey, Scott, let's take an action item to follow up with Bob on this, it will call that out. So you don't have to have someone sitting in the meeting to be able to do that. And where this relates to ROI is like as we were going into our budget this year, we had some needs for some additional admin capabilities in the organization. We actually decided not to do that and invest in Copilot instead so that we don't have to have like my admin sitting in every meeting that we're in order to take notes, so she can go now do more different things across the organization and help support more people.
Yeah.
So note taking is just a huge one. Like the ability for that to summarize those meetings, give intelligent responses. Whenever I meet with someone at Microsoft, they're like, in 3 minutes, I'll send you a summary of everything we talked about, the action items, my action items. And it's great. It works really well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a huge one. I just got access to Teams chat. And Scott, you've heard me talk about this for probably 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Like how I want an intelligent way to be able to find internal information. Because
Right.
when I meet with new people after they start, one of the common things I hear is like, I just don't know where to find stuff.
SharePoint, OneDrive, where's it at? Email.
Yeah. And I know we're on version 7 of SharePoint of the iterations that we've made to try to make it better.
Yep.
Copilot search chat is so cool. So I tried it out. I said, like, we just changed our dental provider this year. So I said, who's our dental provider? It answered that question. No one programmed that in there. It just looked through all of our data internally, gave a great answer to that. Like, how do I get my new dental card? It gave an answer to that. Those are the kind of things that we have to field a lot of questions on today that we shouldn't have to field those questions anymore. So, the search data in Teams and SharePoint, it's always been okay. And every time, they do a new generation, it gets a little bit better. But this is like transformationally better. So I'm really excited to see how that can reduce just the questions that people have to ask internally and how they can get answers more quickly. And then customer service is the same kind of thing, except for externally. Imagine if your customers can look through all of your support case history and all your knowledge base and ask intelligent questions of it and get really good responses without having to reach out to you and have you spend time answering that question. That just holds so much potential for giving even greater customer service. And service bots have been out for a little while, but in my experience, they have a little subset of answers that they can give, and then you have to end up talking to a human anyway.
Yep.
But this allows you to take information from so many more places. You don't have to program in every single response.
Yep.
And that's just a huge shift in this. So if you're not thinking about these three things in particular, I think you're missing the boat on ways to really save money with AI as we go into 2024.
Right. And this kind of goes into this comment right here as well, right, Eric? Like, we're obviously not we're always overestimating the change that will occur, right? And don't let yourself be lulled really into the inaction that's there, right? What did you mean by this quote as well?
Well, this is actually Carl's idea, so I got to shout out to Carl because he's the one who suggested this, but I really like it. And so as we finish up today, we're talking about a lot of things that are coming in the future, but don't just sit back and wait for 10 years from now and be like, oh, somebody will figure it out and then I'll do it. Like, you're going to be so far behind. So yes, we did talk about a lot of things that are maybe changing soon. And maybe we're overestimating how impactful that would be. But if you don't jump on the train and start learning this stuff, you're going to be left behind. So don't let yourself be lulled into action just because you think there's too much hype about AI right now.
Yep. And I'd 100% agree with that. And like I said, start experimenting with more of these types of technologies. Like in Outlook, for example, there's another one, Eric, that I'm using all the time, which is the documents that it basically summarizes for me inside of Outlook. I can now open up an email in the new Outlook and it'll show me all the different files that are related to the conversations that we've had. So like I said, start experimenting more with these internally in your organization, obviously, because I think you're going to be more surprised on the capabilities than what maybe you had initially anticipated, right? Because as you get deeper into this, like I've seen other tech trends that are like, yeah, that's kind of trendy. It's not really something that's really tangible. This is very tangible. This is very disruptive, and you need to understand how you can interact with that technology to really be successful long term. And you don't want to be waiting a year from now to try to get ramped up, because you're going to be really far behind, as you can imagine, in terms of the understanding, the configurability, and the journey that a lot of customers have gone through. You should start that journey now, sooner rather than later. So,
yeah, no, you said that very well. This is one of those that you should jump on right away. Some of these other trends we've talked about are important, but this is one that really is going to be transformational. So the sooner you jump in and learn more about it, the sooner you can actually take advantage of it and really save some money and give your clients a better experience.
Yep, agreed. Awesome. Well, Eric, I know we're kind of at time here. I've got to run to another demonstration. I'm sure you've got plenty on your plate as well. Thank you for taking the time and giving us some of these insights and conversation. It really is appreciated. We're really excited, obviously, here to be able to help support any of you that have questions, either our internal team, if you're a prospect of ours, or if you're a customer of ours, we'd love to drill down even further, obviously, in these conversations. So thank you again for your time, Eric, and thank you to all who have watched. 2 weeks from now, we'll have a schedule posted here as well in terms of our next Confab event. I'm sure Carly and team will post that in chat here, but at a high level, it should be a lot of fun, and we're really looking forward to 2024 and helping you really around these initiatives, and I'm sure many others that you want to tackle. So with that, thank you again, Eric, for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Scott. Thanks everyone for tuning in and asking questions.
Awesome. Well, everyone have a great one, and we will talk to you 2 weeks from now. Thank you much.
Thank you.